Indira Gandhi needed the support of the left. From then on, all the education ministers said that history must be rewritten according to Marxist principles. Now, if you're a secular nation, it means that you cannot talk about Hindu persecution elsewhere.
Right.
You will talk about Palestinian persecution. You will talk about Uyghurs.
Yeah.
You will talk about everybody when there are 50 other nations that can talk about it. But there is no nation to talk for India.
Yeah.
Right? So, it is our destiny that we are the only guys who can defend Hinduism.
Right.
So from purely a political and practical perspective, I am saying we need to be a Hindu Rashtra. The Dharma is about the search for unity by accepting differences as a way of life.
नमस्ते, जय हिंद दोस्तों। आप देख रहे हैं द अवारा मुसाफिर शो और ये है सीजन 3 का पहला एपिसोड। इस एपिसोड में हम बात कर रहे हैं मिस्टर आर जगन्नाथन से, हु इज फेमस फॉर हिज थॉट्स अबाउट हिंदू राष्ट्र। उन्होंने एक किताब भी लिखी है जिसका नाम है धार्मिक नेशन। ही इज हिमसेल्फ द एडिटोरियल डायरेक्टर ऑफ स्वराज्य मैगजीन। ये एपिसोड देख के ऐसा हो सकता है कि आपको बहुत ज़्यादा गुस्सा है, या ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि आपको बहुत ज़्यादा ये एपिसोड सोचने पे मजबूर कर दे। बिकॉज इस एपिसोड में हम बात करते हैं अबाउट हिंदू राष्ट्र। वी टॉक अबाउट धर्म, अधर्म, रिलीजन्स ऑफ डिफरेंट टाइप्स, और हर रिलीजन को इंडिया में रहना है तो उन्हें क्या करना होगा, उन्हें किस तरह से बर्ताव करना होगा, और हर रिलीजन में क्या रिफॉर्म्स आनी चाहिए। This episode is for the intellectual people who are interested in knowing more about Bharat and the future of Hinduism. Recently, I saw this one interesting thing that was happening, and this is from Jaipur. This came few days back in newspaper articles as well. So, for the construction of metros, there was demolition of more than 100 temples, and one temple was 286 years old. And since your book is out now, it's called Dharmic Nation. You have talked about how India needs to go back to its roots, how India needs to become a Hindu Rashtra again. What do you think about this thing? Firstly, what are your views? Because when a country needs to become a Hindu Rashtra, it needs to follow its traditions, its cultures. And here we are, because of modernization, we have to get rid of some temples and some, religious places as well. So what is your take on that?
So my thing is, I think it's unfortunate if ancient temples or temples with a lot of heritage are demolished. So obviously we need to take more care to see that either we move them to a place, if something very important for development needs to take place, some of the old structures can actually be moved to some more sensible places.
Right.
Because very often you don't know where a temple got built, it got buried in sand, and before when you're digging you suddenly find it.
Correct.
So that part is there. So I think certainly we need to take more care, and I think people like archaeological survey can help when these things are done.
Right.
On the other hand, I am also a modernist in some way. What I mean by that is that while we have ancient temples and heritage, I think there is scope in Hinduism.
Right.
Not just when I talk about Hinduism, I don't just talk about the religious part, but in terms of traditions and others. Very often Hinduism is defined by traditions, rituals and practices, and not by scripture. Though we all recite some common things from the Rig Veda or the Upanishads, but by and large, our Hinduism at every local level is defined by traditions, practices and rituals.
Correct.
Even so, every 100 miles there may be a different tradition that's slightly variation. So when we talk about Hinduism or Hindu Rashtra, I am not talking about a theocratic state at all.
Okay.
I am talking about, yes, discover all your traditions, but also create new traditions, which will help you move forward. Because there has to be old temples, for example, were created for a certain audience.
Right.
There's a small community living just a few hundred people around them, built a nice medium-sized temple.
Right.
But today, if thousands of people land up there, you're going to create a mess.
Correct.
Okay, you're going to destroy the environment, and you're going to do that.
Correct.
So you got to now make sure that there are new temples that cater to various requirements of modernity, even while keeping traditional practices alive.
Right.
So you need to find that middle path.
Correct. So, sir, now I have multiple questions here. I asked those in our conversation, throughout our conversation, but one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you, and this would be the point where we can also tell the audience what really the book is about. Because when I read the book, I got to figure out that, okay, you talk about Hindutva, you talk about Dharma, you talk about Hindu Rashtra, you talk about, in general, Hinduism. I want to firstly talk about Dharma because the book is called Dharmic Nation. Now, when I search for Dharma, there are various different, definitions of Dharma. So what is Dharma really according to you? Because a very generic term that I got from Google is a code of proper conduct conforming to one's duty and nature. So what is dharma really?
See, dharma is something that is, that definition is a good enough working definition.
Okay.
What it means is that dharma depends on context.
Right.
Like if you have two choices between good and bad,
Yeah.
then you know what to choose.
Yeah.
Sometimes the choice is between good and better. So you then choose which is better.
Right.
Sometimes the choice is between bad and worse. So you make those choices.
Okay.
So dharma is defined as what is the right thing to do in the right context. So in a certain context, the same action may be right. In a certain other context, the same action need not be right. So
Right.
individuals have to think for themselves and see which is the best possible option when you are deciding on a course of action.
Correct.
So broadly, that is dharma. But
Right.
in common sense terms, very often we ask what exactly do I mean by the title of this book, Dharmic Nation.
Yeah.
Okay, Dharmic Nation, basically I have tried to answer a question. Who are we as a people?
Right.
If you remember, Samuel Huntington asked this question about Americans.
Correct.
Right, in the 90s.
Yeah.
And he said we are a Western Judeo-Christian civilization with certain antecedents. We draw from also Hellenism and other things, right? So that is how we define America. Now, I am saying we are a nation built on the concept of dharma, however you want to define dharma, right? The details we can go into later. And the four pillars include the four major religions that were birthed here,
Right.
which is what we call today Hinduism, whereas Hinduism itself is mixed up with many sub-religions there.
Correct.
Or sub-ideas and practices. Buddhism, Jainism and Sikhism.
Right.
So these are the four pillars, I think, of the Dharmic Nation. In a
Right.
sense, these were all birthed in this geography and all their holy places are here, all their ideas are here.
Yeah.
And plus, there are some scores of smaller traditions,
Correct.
like say tribal traditions and Vanvasi traditions. Those are also dharmic, but they had interactions with these four pillars in small or large extent.
Yeah.
And together they form the idea called the dharmic culture, where we have certain basic things. What is the first political philosophy of a dharma? That is, every god has a right to be worshipped.
Right.
No one should denigrate somebody else's idea of a god or spirituality, and nobody can criticize somebody who says, I don't believe in God. So basically it's a pluralistic, open society. Dharma believes that you cannot say that my God is right, therefore I am going to destroy your God or your faith. So that is the basic of dharmic thinking. So if you see the Rig Veda, it's a lot of it is history,
Correct.
where there are tribes quarreling with one another, fighting one another, some triumph, some fail. But there is always one thing at the end of it. That is, no god of even a defeated tribe is humiliated. In the last verse of the Rig Veda, that is exactly what they say. Here we are gathered here. We want to seek the blessings of all the gods and we want to live in unity. Right? So the Dharma is about the search for unity by accepting differences as a way of life.
Wow.
So that is the key to understanding the concept of Dharma. It is not about theocracy. If I say, oh, this is the only God you will worship, that is not Dharma. That is adharma. Actually.
Right.
So when I say dharmic nations, it is this understanding of diversity as core to Dharma. And you can follow your own Dharma because in your own situation it may be different.
Correct.
So you are in a certain situation, you have to take a call, you do that. But it doesn't have to be at the cost of somebody else if you can avoid it. If it is at the cost of somebody else, make it justifiable. If you have to fight somebody or fight for your own rights, then you do what it is. That is your Dharma.
Right. But so, can Dharma exist without Hinduism? Because when we see the demography of India, when we look at the population, we see Hinduism is not the only religion that is followed here. There's Islam, there's Christianity, and as you said, Buddhism, Jainism, a lot of different religions. So can Dharma exist with all of these religions?
Yeah, I don't think there is a problem with the four pillar religions that came here, because they grew, they quarreled, they debated, they did everything together, right? And ultimately they came to a synthesis on how to deal with differences, right? The two ideas that came from outside India were Christianity and Islam.
Right.
And these two people had a very binary approach to belief and things. Now, which is where I keep saying towards the end, actually, that the problem is not with their way of worship.
Right.
Their problem is about other religions and how they accept them or as realities.
Yeah.
So they need to become dharmic religions, not in terms of worshipping the gods we worship,
Right.
but accepting that this way of worship is as valid as worship of Allah, the Prophet, or Jesus, or the Trinity.
Yeah.
This is fine. We don't have an issue with how you worship. So these two religions merely need to conform to the rules of Dharma. They don't have to change and become Hindus. So that is what I am arguing, that you are a dharmic nation, so live by dharmic rules. When you go to America, if they have a set of rules that you must drive on the right side of the road, you can't say this is a free country, I'll drive on the other side of the road.
Right.
You set the rules of conduct. So Dharma has certain rules of conduct on how you treat others who believe in a different God, a different way of worship, or no God. So these religions have to become dharmic in that sense. They do not have to give up their own way of thinking.
Correct.
What they need to do is alternate a binary approach to their faith and other faiths. You can't say my faith, otherwise go through the highway.
Right.
It's not like I am right, therefore you are wrong. That there is no conclusion like that.
Yeah.
If I am right, there is no guarantee that you may be wrong. For all of us, both of may be right partially, or both of us may be right quite substantially, or both of us may be wrong.
Correct.
So religion is basically an unprovable fact. I mean, you have an approach to God. You have decided this is God. Okay. And tomorrow, if some new God comes and says that, or who demonstrates to people that this is a better way of worship, you will get it.
Right.
So there is no end to it. It's a cycle.
But so when we look at the Abrahamic religions, now in Hinduism, I don't know if this is true or not, but the larger conversations are that Hinduism allows you to believe in anything, and then there's the Charvak philosophy, there's a proper philosophy for every sort of thought in Hinduism. But Abrahamic religions, now, if you don't believe in their God, then you are the kafir. So can Dharma then exist in this country with all these other religions? What is your take on that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I think if you want to find a way to live in harmony and with unity, despite what you believe in terms of your religion, they have to adapt to the dharmic sense of rules of how to conduct interreligious dialogue and difference. So that is what they have to accept.
Correct.
They don't have to change their religion or their scripture. Nobody is asking you to rewrite the Quran or any such thing. We are asking you, these are the rules of a dharmic nation.
Right.
So conform to that. Don't come and saying that if I am right, all of you guys are wrong. You have no right to equality, right? So that is where they need to adapt. If they are willing to do that, I think there will be no conflict in this place.
Right.
I mean, very little at least.
Right. So do you think the country that we live in right now, in these modern times, 2023, are we in a way dharmic nation, or do we need to do more? Because when I look at my generation especially, and when I look at the older generation, probably of my grandparents or my parents, they at least used to read our scriptures. They knew how to read little bit of Sanskrit at least. But today, people don't prefer reading Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana and stuff like that. Even parents don't promote these things. So how do you think we can go back to becoming a dharmic nation? Because all of these things, they are slowly dying. I don't know what better word to use for this, but I have to say that the concept of reading scriptures is slowly dying. And if you want to become a dharmic nation, and you also argue about becoming a Hindu Rashtra, all of these things are necessary. So how do you think we can deal with this?
There are 2-3 ways of understanding this. First of all, we need to understand the negative impact colonialism had on us.
Right.
We have had nearly 1,000 years of both between Islamic and British colonialism, right? So that actually made us a very diffident kind of people,
right,
with low self-esteem. Okay, so that is one of the reasons when after 1947, when you do that, while our grandparents practiced the religion the way they were taught through their forefathers,
okay,
but the generation after that became self-loathing Hindus. I mean, people like me thought, every day you're criticized, oh, you guys created caste, you guys did,
right,
you died this sati, this is what you all have done. You guys have worst possible religion. That is what the missionaries told us. And we internalize this negativism. Yes, there is a lot we have to reform. That's a separate issue. But the question really is, do we really need to be so self-loathing? Unless we discover the sense of pride in whatever is the heritage, you are not going to want to even read the scripture.
Correct.
Right? You must have said there is a Varna system. It says that this chap is untouchable, this fellow is below you, you cannot go anywhere near that fellow. That's what it is supposed to have taught, right? So people are burning Manusmriti and all that. But 99% of Manusmriti is not about that. Okay, and 99% of Hinduism is not about that. That we got into this trouble is something that we need to discuss as a society to see that we don't discriminate against our own people. Right? That is one part of it. But the key thing is that I think there is a lot more interest today in understanding who we were as a people today, even among people of age. In fact, my generation is what that lost touch.
Right.
But my daughter keeps asking me about, saying, how come you don't know anything about this? So I have to go to some website and try figure out all this. You should have taught me. So in my mother's generation, they knew how to practice what they had to do. Right. They may not have known high philosophy, but they knew the everyday practices of Hinduism. But my generation completely we went to the IIT, we went abroad, we settled this. So we went in search of higher, what you would call, economic progress in the hope that we will be happier.
Right.
But the generation after that is taken that as a given. So they are finding that I think I need to know more about my heritage and all. So there is interest.
Right.
Now you're not going to sit and from morning to evening recite the Rig Veda or the Bhagavad Gita. But you want to know what it is. And some people may want deeper study. So nobody is going to accept ancient Hinduism as the way we must live today.
Right.
I mean, we are living in the 21st century and everything has changed from AI to whatever it is. And so if you think that you are going to sit puja part for 2 hours at morning and 3 hours in the evening, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So we need to redefine the heritage in the way we need to for this century.
So I truly believe that my generation or probably the future generation that is coming up now, the Gen Z whom we call, they are the truly independent generation of India. Because right now we know what is the potential of India and how big we can go, and we understand, okay, we have a very ancient philosophies, we have ancient culture, we have traditions and everything. It's just that we were not taught those things in our schools or in our families as well, for that matter. And now we are going out again and we are trying to look out for people who can teach us, and you are one of those people. That is how I got in touch with you, because I wanted to learn about these things. So you also talk about Hindu Rashtra. Now, this is one of the biggest debatable topic that I have with the people of my own generation. I come from a journalism school, and journalists, they love to debate about any and every topic. And this was one of those topics, like the BJP government was just coming into the power at that time. And the larger conversation was about Hindu Rashtra. We always had this debate, and there's a negative connotation with Hindu Rashtra. And now you are advocating in this book that India, if it needs to progress, if it wants to save Hinduism, it needs to become a Hindu Rashtra.
Basically, what I mean by Hindu Rashtra is never any theocracy. Okay, that is clear. It is just a variation of the idea of a Dharmic nation protecting Dharma in the way around.
Right.
The reason why I talk about Hindu Rashtra, where the state stands by to protect Hindu interests, the reason is a very simple demographic one. There are more than 100 Christian countries. There are more than 50 Muslim countries. And that is not the reason I am asking why India should be a Hindu Rashtra. The problem is, in India, all those communities exist. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, whatever, right? But there is no country that defends Hindu interests once you become a secular nation. We need to abandon the concept of secularism as it's been taught to us. Secularism for us should mean pluralism, that is living with diversity and difference. Right? It is not, secularism is a completely different meaning in the European context. So the word for me is no relevance. So what is a Hindu Rashtra? It is a Rashtra that can, because there is no other nation that will talk for Hindu interests. You saw that during the CAA stuff. Right? What happened? We were trying to speak up on behalf of persecuted Hindus in Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. Do we not know that Hindu population in Bangladesh has fallen from 22% in 1951 to 8% today? Okay, 13% drop in the population, and nobody cares. Right? Now, if you are a secular nation, it means that you cannot talk about Hindu persecution elsewhere. You will talk about Palestinian persecution. You will talk about Uyghurs. You will talk about everybody, when there are 50 other nations that can talk about it. But there is no nation to talk for India. Right? So it is our destiny that we are the only guys who can defend Hinduism. So from purely a political and practical perspective, I am saying we need to be a Hindu Rashtra. The definition of which is not theocracy, but the definition of which is the protection of Hindu rights in India and everywhere. And I believe in one more thing, that every Hindu anywhere in the world should have a right to appeal to India for entry, permanent residency, like a right to return. You know, so just like you feel you're not happy or persecuted in Pakistan, please come.
You should be able to come back to India.
Come back. Yeah. So those are the things that only a state can do.
Right.
You can't just say I'm praying daily, I'm going to Ganesh Ji's mandir and I'm a Hindu, therefore that's it. Because the key thing we need to realize is both Christianity and Islam have religion on one side of the coin, but the other side of the coin is politics.
Right.
Which means, what is politics? Politics is about when I say, what I say has to apply not only to me but for everybody else. Then you are basically imposing your view on others.
Correct.
Politics is about imposing a majority view on others. Right? So all these guys are actually playing politics because they believe in democracy, demographic change, they believe in conversions. So who is going to protect Hindus if we say everything is fine, you can be whatever you want?
Right.
So merely to protect your own interests, you got to be a Hindu Rashtra. Unless there are certain other constitutional guarantees that Hindus will not keep shrinking demographically, and there is no country to fight for you. So you need that state heft to protect those things. So, and without that, you cannot even protect the rights of minorities. If you're going to live in a fluid situation, every day you're going to have some problem or the other because you need to have an understanding with Muslims and Christians on what is the right way to conduct our community relationships.
Right.
So that cannot happen unless Hindus are organized. Hindus can't be organized like this except through the state.
Correct.
No? So because you are in so many sampradayas, so one guy can represent Hindus. So the Hindu state has to step in and say, I will speak on behalf of all sampradayas on common Hindu interests.
Right.
That are necessary. And elsewhere.
Correct. But so then, were you angry when the BJP government didn't, go out of their way, or probably just, didn't do the most common and basic thing that you need to do to save your citizens when the Nupur Sharma incident happened? Because that was a person who was being targeted by international communities, international governments in fact. And okay, whatever she said is a completely different debate, but here is one of your citizens who is being targeted. And when I look at, the larger perspective, so for Islam, a lot of countries talk like, Turkey, Saudi and Iran. For Christianity, there's many countries. US is one of those countries. For Hindus, India being a largely Hindu populated country, we still don't talk about Hindus.
Yeah.
So what needs to be done to, save the Hindus today?
Yeah, that's exactly why I talked about the whole idea of Hindu Rashtra itself in the first place. Because if there is no state protecting your interests, then there's a problem. Protecting Hindu interests does not mean damaging the rights of other minorities.
Correct.
It cannot be. If that is the case, then there is no point. Then you are basically in a 0-1 situation, a binary situation which Islam practices or Christianity practices in their own way. Right? So that's not the point. But if you do not, the only country that can speak for Hindus, if it is not speaking for Hindus, there's a problem. So you need to have a situation where I think Hindus in some ways are learned to organize, collectively find a way to represent their collective interests, not their specific sampradaya interests, and fight for it. And part of it, the state will have to help organize because you have a problem there.
Correct. So, okay, this is something which I have had major issues with to understand this term Hindutva. Now, in your book, I saw the very positive side of Hindutva, but when I look at news channels, when I see the larger perspective, the conversations that are happening about this one term Hindutva, there are a lot of negative connotations for probably, justified reasons, probably, I don't know, because a lot of people who talk about Hindutva, they also talk about picking up weapons. And they talk about this openly. So what is really Hindutva? Because I also want to understand, did Hindutva come first and Hinduism later, or is it vice versa? What is the byproduct of what?
Yeah, so the plain definition of the meaning of Hindutva is Hinduness, right? Now, because we were not a top-down religion, our religion didn't arise because there was a founder and who then set a set of fundamentals and came. We were from the ground up. We became Hindus by interacting with one another, learning from one another. Therefore, Hindutva is the idea that is core to us. Not so much the Hinduism. There is no Hinduism actually. Because if you look at Hinduism in contrast to a Christianity or Islam, there is no one set of fundamentals that Hinduism claims. But Hindutva, that is the degree of connection we think of as Hindus. See, Hindus are a geographical and cultural entity, right? Hindutva is the degree of connection you have with the term Hindu, right? So the minute you define Hindutva like that, I would say Hindutva is the generic term. Hinduism is how you practice, which form of religion or spirituality you practice.
Right.
So that can be multiple. There can be many Hinduisms, but there is only one Hindutva. That is, each person decides what is my connection with the term Hindu. Right? Culturally, I am a Hindu. I may be a Nastik, I may be a Nastik, or I may be a believer, non-believer, I may be many things.
Right.
So this is important. So the second thing is, you should not accept definitions of Hindutva that the enemies of Hindus decide. Now, I can choose to define Christianity by only those radical evangelists who go around destroying abortion clinics because they say abortion is not allowed in this church or that church, right? Or who go around destroying temples. Even in India, there are situations like that. If I say Christianity is this, will they accept it? No. Now, you can't say you will define Hindutva by going only to that one fellow who has gone and beaten up some Gaurakshak, who was beaten up a Muslim for no reason, right? So, you can't define Hindutva that way. When it comes to arms, I'd say I would be more careful. The point is, you have a right to defend yourself. So, it's a question of whether you think if you're going to be attacked, you're going to be defending yourself. This arms is not meant to offend. It is not meant to go and hurt somebody else's interest. But it is about protecting your interest. If you see all our gods, whether it is Krishna, Rama, they all have weapons. And the reason is they protected Dharma. So for protection of Dharma, you need to defend yourself. You can't say, I'll allow myself to be beheaded.
Correct.
You know. So I think, why did Sikhism also change after Guru Tegh Bahadur? He offered his head to Aurangzeb. Then Guru Gobind Singh, no, we are not going to offer our heads. We are going to defend ourselves. Right. So the Panth changed after the 10th Guru. Right. So similarly with Hindus, I mean, we have never had gods who are squeamish about defending their Dharma. We have never had, Krishna didn't say that, okay, let's all sit and light candlelight on Kurukshetra and hope that the Kauravas will retire and go home. Right? He didn't. That kind of unwillingness to fight. The only way to ensure peace is to show a willingness to defend and fight.
Right.
So in that sense, arms are necessary, but it is not meant to be an offensive idea.
Right. But do you think Hinduism has enemies? Like, I don't know, because isn't this, like, we live in 2023, why are we still fighting about the religion? Why are we still in this, debate? What is your take about that?
My take is a very simple one. I think that Hinduism and Dharma are the only basis for living together in the world in 21st century.
Okay.
It is not about which god you worship. It is about how you accept difference and diversity. Now, if the concept of, if you accept that, in the 21st century, you can choose to follow a religion or not choose to follow a religion. Which religion allows you not to follow their religion? Does Christianity allow atheism? No. For them, the atheists are enemies. In our case, it's not. So in the 21st century, if you're talking about diversity and difference, which is the way to coexist, I would say Hinduism is the only rational way to look at religion, if at all you want to be religious. You follow what you want to follow. You believe in Krishna, you worship Krishna. You don't believe in Krishna, you can worship Shiva if you don't want. Or if you want, you can worship, there are names like Shiva, Rama, Krishna. You worship all three. Or Ganesha or whatever. So choice is yours. So our way of Hinduism or thinking Hindu is how does an individual empower himself or herself based on your own idea of God and nature. Right? So we have the concept of the Ishta Devata. That is, you choose which God you follow. In Christianity, there is no option. You can't say that I don't believe in Jesus, I believe in this particular God. Right? So then you're not a Christian automatically, and you can be criticized or even excommunicated or whatever it is. Right? It's not so. Here God is a tool used to empower individuals. So if you really want an individual-based society in the 21st century, which is where we are all heading, then what other option do you have except Hinduism? All others are basically dogmas.
Right. But sir, you talked about Hinduism is nothing, like there was nothing like Hinduism. And then there's this one term which is used, Sanatan Dharma. Can you talk about these two things? Because then a person like me, I get confused because I have been a Hindu all my life, and then I am being told that there's nothing like Hinduism. And this is something which a lot of the left leaning liberals also say, that there was nothing like Hinduism. The colonial masters, they say, we gave you Hinduism, we made you what you are. So, what is this whole debate about?
I mean, there is some truth to what the colonials say. Basically, the idea that Hinduism is a religion, and they try to look at it as the way they looked at Christianity. So they try to cast Hinduism in the same kind of logic of the Abrahamic religions. Whereas Hinduism exists, but it exists in multiple forms. So there are several Hinduisms, if at all you want to say there is Hinduism. There is no one Hinduism with one unique set of circumstances and things, right? So that is the difference. When you say Samadhi, there is another way. I mean, some people thought that what is an eternal religion, right? Something that has constantly changed, reformed itself, met new challenges and all. So they call it eternal. Sanatan Dharma is that way of looking at the way Hinduism has changed from the time of the Rig Veda. If you assume that that's technically the start of it. And then you have all the other Vedas, the Vedanta, Upanishads, Purana, and various things. And you also have a parallel, the other, the Buddhism and Hinduism. And both these traditions actually borrowed from one another, by the way. So it's not like the Vedic, the post-Vedic age didn't borrow from from Buddhist and Jainish idea. I mean, for example, Gandhi's whole idea of non-violence is substantially a Jain borrowing. Right? So, I mean, because Jains are a lot in Gujarat, so that idea has seeped into parts of Hinduism there also. So it's that's the way we have grown. So we are Sanatan in the sense, you can, it's not a proper noun in the sense of a definition of one religion. It's about something that is eternal and yet ever changing. That is the way you should look at the word, the term Sanatan Dharma.
So now again, when I come back to the topic of Hindutva, so there's this brilliant book which is written by Arvindan Neelkandan, and in that book he says, if Hindutva is the life process of greater Indian landmass, then Hinduism is a subset of it. So again, that debate about did Hindutva come first and then after that Hinduism, in the modern world, does every Hindu need to adopt the philosophy of Hindutva to survive in this modern world where we see that a lot of people are being converted to another religions, and we don't need to talk about which religion, we all know which. So do we all need to adopt this philosophy of Hindutva now?
See, Hindutva is a highly individualized version of how much of a Hindu you want to be or choose to be, right? I am Hindu to some extent. I am also a modern person who looks at ideas beyond Hinduism or our own scripture, right? So Hindutva is that constant adaptation to change. So you tend to become, it's like this. When we think there is a threat to my way of life and my way of spiritual thinking, then my Hinduness increases. Because I need to now toughen myself and say I am more Hindu. Right? When there is no threat to your existence, you can actually say, okay, can be more relaxed. I can progress without thumping my chest and say I am Hindu, right? So Hindutva depends on the threat perception at any point of time. That is my way of looking at it. So I think that Hindutva is core to us. What we need to do is, depending on what is your challenge today, you define yourself in softer terms or harder terms based on what you need to. Once the danger is past, you can actually do what you have to do. I mean, you can be who you are. Because if Hindus say that you can be anyone you want to be, right? There's no constraint imposed by stricture except moral and ethical grounds. If you leave that aside, they don't say you have to wear a tilak, otherwise you're not a Hindu. Nobody says that, okay, you have to have a tuft or you're not a Hindu. All those things are not required. So a lot of things, increasingly we are going to move away from caste-based definitions. Right? So you define Hindutva like that. Today, who are the biggest votaries of Hindus? It's not those upper caste. It's those OBCs and others who have suddenly realized, after they have made some economic progress, that we are also Hindus. We can have as much right to call ourselves Hindus. So they have discovered their Hindutva, their Hindu-ness. As long as they were kept at the periphery of the economic paradigm, they had no reason to think they were Hindu. No? Maybe they thought maybe we are being discriminated against. So whether it is OBC, tomorrow it will be Dalits who will feel that they are the core Hindus.
Right.
Because they are discovering their Hinduness now. When gradually discrimination and things are reducing, right?
Correct.
Okay, the narrative abroad may be that it is not decreasing, but I cannot see how it is not decreasing.
Correct.
Today you get into a bus, you are asking anybody, are you this caste or that caste? Today, at the most, where caste probably works is when you are looking at arranged marriages. When you are looking at arranged marriage, you tend to look within your own Jati. So, because you know that culturally there will be greater similarities and the families find easier to accept. But when you go and meet in college campus, nobody knows all that. Anybody you like, marry you, anybody you like. So, this happens.
Right. So, I want to talk about caste, but before that, one small, digression, which is, so I create content about Indian history, and whenever I talk about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, my comment section goes wide, because when you don't say Maratha, there are people who are coming forward to talk about that. When you don't say Chhatrapati, there are people coming out to talk about that. And in general, then there are liberals who claim Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj for them. Then there are the right-wingers who claim him for themselves. And in this whole debate, now you are here, you are saying that, okay, you need to adopt the identity of being a Hindu, you need to adopt the philosophy of Hindutva, but in certain, percentage, you have to change with the modern world, you have to bring in reforms. But who is going to teach these things to the people? Because very few people would understand that every religion needs a reform. How do you teach this to people?
I don't think you need to teach anybody reform. I think most people will start changing those things on their own once they realize it doesn't work in their life. How rigid can you be in terms of what you have learned when you're thinking, when your parents may have told you that you have to do this, you have to do that, and a whole lot of things, right? So in modern life, you are not going to face those challenges if you are going to be exactly like that. So traditions can change, but your identity need not change. So I think when it comes to, you talk about Shivaji and all, yeah, different people will have different this thing. But for Hindu society as a whole, he represents a huge shift in terms of somebody who fought an aggressive theme more than a ruler. He fought the idea that the whole of India needs to be Islamized, and all came from the Mughal and previous Islamic history. So he changed it. He called it Hindu Padshai and Hindu Swaraj. All those things came from him. Even though he had many Muslims and others in his army. His point was also dharmic, that you are not going to discriminate against you because you don't follow my religion, but you need protection. That is what he said.
Correct. So, do you think somewhere we went wrong in our education system? Like since the time we became independent, do you think our education was somehow I don't know, like probably changed for the greater benefit of some people? Because when I look today, so again, those comment section, there are I have seen people talk and take side of the Mughal, take sides of Aurangzeb, which we know the sort of criminality that he has done, the kind of atrocities that he has done, and there are still people of a particular religion who support him, who idolize him. Do you think this is because of education, or this is just some other sort of debate?
No, it's not. This part of it is not because of education. I think some communities want to eulogize certain things because they have been told consistently that it's your job to proselytize and convert people, and that anybody who is not belonging to your religion is either a devil worshipper or a kafir, if that's what is being told and drilled into their minds from that. Obviously for them, an Aurangzeb will be a hero because he was busy destroying idols and doing whatever he had to do. Right. So I think it is that core concept that you need to have, not whether he got into worshipping Tipu Sultan or Aurangzeb because this idea has been drilled into him. And that is what is wrong. That is what needs to change. It can't only change with the education system. As far as the education system is concerned, I think the mistake we made right in the beginning was to not emphasize our regional languages, including not just Hindi but all regional languages. Because Hinduism exists in the regional language, and all our regional language owe their parentage to two core languages, Sanskrit and Tamil. Okay, because Tamil for the southern languages, But Tamil, Sanskrit is heavily there in South also.
Yeah.
And North, of course, was heavily influenced by Sanskrit and Prakrit and all those things, right? So, by not emphasizing mother tongue based education, we actually made entire generations of people deracinated. I mean, they then learn. The point is, how you think makes a big difference to how you view your culture.
Correct.
If you view your culture through your mother tongue, you will automatically learn to revere it. If you learn it through English, you will immediately learn to use English words to describe your own thoughts. Right. So that is the fundamental mistake we made, and that is because British colonization made that difference, and the IAS that followed was immediately a successor of the ICS, and ICS was a Macaulay kind of production.
Absolutely.
Where the idea was to create local brown sahibs who will then be more loyal than the king. And that system has continued for us. And this is what we are suffering from. Today, the new language policy is saying let's be taught in the mother tongue and all. But by the time but most people who want to build a career know that English is very vital for them.
Yeah.
So we can actually take a middle ground. I think we should follow a 3-language formula, where I think you are taught in the mother tongue till at least 4th or 5th standard.
Yeah.
You can introduce English and a second language pretty early, say from the 1st standard. So by the time he passes school, he will be good in English.
Yeah.
So English is not the enemy.
Yeah.
But the problem is our language politics has descended to such a level that we have pitted Hindi against Tamil. We have pitted, even though in each of these states they are actually murdering their own sister dialects. For example, in Kannada, in Karnataka, there are Tulu, Konkani speakers, and Kodava. All those languages exist. Now, when you make Kannada dominant, they are killing all those languages. Right? So, it's not Kannada or Tamil versus Hindi.
Right.
But in Hindi itself, there are so many languages. There is Maithili, there is Bhojpuri, there is so many things.
Right.
And we are not taking note of them. We need to, what are the roots of those languages also?
Correct.
Because, so what I am trying to tell you is that language cannot be a matter of politics. It should be a matter for regional pride, and it should be the primary language of education from the first time you land up in school to a certain stage. And from 1st standard, you can learn 2nd and 3rd language, which can be English and something else.
Right.
We need to follow this in all states. Once you do that, nobody will have a problem with any language.
Right. In this matter, I think China has done phenomenally well, because China, again, an ancient civilization, but they never gave English that importance which we have given. And this is why I asked you this particular question, because since the time Macaulay brought in English education, everything went downhill from there, and we never changed our education system. Finally, probably now it will change, but we never know what kind of changes that would be.
See, China destroyed a lot of its own subcultures. Okay, China has been at war with itself for more than 2000 years.
Why do you say this?
Because, see, in China, the dominant philosophy has always been about creating a monoculture. So, the Han people and the Mandarin they speak, the Chinese they speak. There is a Cantonese, there is so many other variations of it. But gradually they are trying to kill off the rest and make it a single language focus.
Okay.
This is would happen, like say if you say only Hindi will be, or only Sanskrit will be the national language.
The debate which is
you can do that in a very small state like Israel, where they went back to Hebrew, even though none of the Babas knew Hebrew at that point when they formed the state.
Yeah.
But we cannot do that. We should not do that, because we are destroying a rich culture. And all of Hinduism exists in the regional languages. If you actually see, it is the regional languages that hold the stories of Hinduism that is relevant to that geography. Even though there are broader national connections, Hinduism exists in the sum of the parts.
Correct.
When you look at the whole, that is what we call Hindutva. That is, there is a little of Hindu in everyone, but each Hindu is a little different from the other.
Wow. Yes.
So that is key. So each Hindu has to discover what is the Hinduness in him, so that we can fight for your common rights.
Right.
Even while you retain your separate Hinduness. I mean, your way of being a Hindu is quite different in Maharashtra as opposed to in Tamil Nadu, right? Or in Assam for that matter, right? So that diversity is what makes Hinduism great.
Correct. But so then the whole country is divided right now into so many subsections, and then again we come to this topic of caste. Now, I recently got to know that caste was never an Indian concept or a Bharatiya concept. This was a Portuguese word, casta, from where caste comes, and we had Varna Jati system. Now, what is caste and what is Varna Jati? Is there any difference between these two?
Yeah, there is. I mean, originally there was. Now it is all being used commonly, right? We did have a description of Varna, which was a description, not a prescription.
Right.
It was a description of how society existed at that time. They saw four broad categories of people.
Yeah.
There were priests who were doing all the puja part stuff.
Yeah.
Then there were the Kshatriyas who defended. And there were the Vaishyas who kept the economy moving. And there were the peasants and others who were doing everyday laborers. Right. They divided. Now, how this became hierarchical and all, we don't know. But in any society, what really happens is over a period of time, description becomes prescription.
Correct.
Right? That is how in Manusmriti, what was a natural order of things that developed from the economy that existed,
right,
suddenly became, say, no, but if you are this, you cannot do that, and all those restrictions came later. So, that is one part. Jati is a reality that no country even today can escape from. Jati is what? Jati is a social group. And what is a social group? What is the first thing you learn in human sociology? That Homo sapiens is a social animal.
Right.
That what is a social animal? The meaning of social means a social group forms by explaining who is us and who is not us.
Correct.
Right. Like if you are in a certain geography and you are in a certain tribe, or even say a larger group than a tribe, you say now these guys who speak this language is us. These guys who don't speak this language is not us. Right. Now we may have the friendly of relationship with both sides, but social groups emerge.
Right.
And social groups keep changing because based on economic circumstances. Like so today, for example, many of them were also vocationally driven, where there were guilds to protect IPR.
Right.
Why did, for example, the sonars, the goldsmiths, become a caste of themselves or a kind of a jati themselves? Because they had certain skills. Today, what do you call? Today, you file for a patent to protect your IPR, right?
Right.
Now, when the state exists, and it will protect your rights if they think you invented it. Now, community-wise IPR protection used to happen through jatis. Like if you are a plumber, you will share all the secrets of good plumbing with people in your own tribe. So you protected IPR.
Right.
Now, over a period of time, this became endogamous because if once you intermarry, then the skills will go elsewhere, and you want to keep your skills and your IPR with yourself.
Correct.
So this is
Makes
how
sense, yeah.
jatis suddenly became very endogamous. Whereas now we say no, anybody should be free to marry anybody. That exists. That is true. So jatis were the truth, and jatis will always be there.
Right.
Today you go to Harvard, you will find that woke liberal will not marry a Republican conservative. Unlikely. He is marrying within his own jati as defined by him.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they will not like it. Or similarly, you won't find whites marrying blacks all the time. You won't find, unlikely. I mean, there will be some marriages like that. There will be some alliances like that, but it will be a rare one. You know, that's because people tend to marry within the same rule. Why do doctors marry other doctors?
Correct.
Because they believe that only another doctor will understand my way of looking at my long-term profession.
Correct.
So my work is my life in many ways. So you tend to marry for that reason.
Right.
Within people, you know. Now this may not be based on our old concept of jati, but new jatis are being formed all the time. Right?
Correct.
So the same thing is happening. Today, why do Welsh people want to create their own nation or Scottish? Because new jatis are formed and in the new economic structure.
Right.
Some want to join the EU because they think that's a better option. Something. You know. So jatis will keep forming.
Okay.
What the Portuguese did was they mixed up the idea of Varna and Jati and made one word caste.
Correct.
And the British, when they were trying to categorize, their view was that the whole scripture is the basis for religion is their assumption. In our case, scripture was never the basis for defining Hinduism, right? Our religion or religious practices were defined by traditions, practices, and rituals and way of life.
Right.
Theirs was defined by scripture. So if Bible says something, then it is part of my thing. If Bible doesn't say anything, it's not part of my religion. If Quran says something, it's part of my religion. You know. Our religion is not defined by what is said in the Rig Veda.
Correct.
We of course look at it for inspiration and we are proud of the heritage. But we don't look at Bhagavad Gita for everyday what guides on what to do, what not to do in a certain situation.
Right.
So we are not a scripture-based religion, even though we have hundreds of religious books, right? So you may choose to use the Bhagavad Gita as your model. So in their case, it was different. So in our case, what happens is the British, when they read all our scriptures, because that was the way they looked at their religion, they thought the Varna Jati system must have a scriptural basis.
Correct.
And then they discovered the Purusha Sukta and the other things in the Rig Veda. So, oh, here he said the Brahmin came out of his mouth and this and that. From that they deduced a hierarchy. And then they said all these jatis, we must force fit them into these 4 Varnas. Right. A lot of people didn't know what Varna they belong to. Right? Vast majority of them. Even today, even if you look at, say, Brahmins, you look at a Brahmin from Bengal and look for a Brahmin from the 2 fellows will be doing completely different things. Right. Even though they are theoretically called Brahmins because they are involved in some priestly duties or were. So this whole business of standardizing all jatis into 4 Varnas was what created a bigger damage. Correct. So to the level of some amount of discrimination that existed, then they made the discrimination permanent. Because they sort of force-fitted everybody into jatis, whereas earlier jatis could move up and down depending on economic circumstances or geography, right? A jati that moved like a group from, say, West Bengal to Uttar Pradesh might think it has improved its status. Right. But by force-fitting them into a Varna, you can never move. Correct. So this was the work of the British, and they did a lot more damage than what the original Varna Jati system had. But anyway, that's a given now. We have accepted this as a reality. So we have got to fix the problem.
But so it's been like 75 years of independence. Why didn't we ever try to correct this mistake? Because when, okay, so for someone like me, caste and everything, it doesn't matter because it never comes up in the normal day-to-day conversation for me. But someone who is living in a village or, you know, the local pockets of Bharat, for them, caste is a very big term and it matters to them. Why didn't we ever try to change this mistake?
Well, basically because for the first 50, 60 years, we did not think very highly of our poor people. We thought these guys just need to be told what to do, and we were run by the Babus. And the Babus were the, discriminators. So they had a certain vision of how India should be run. They did not empower the local communities, right. They did not empower them. So big change did not happen till very recently. And second thing is urbanization gathered pace in the last 30 years. Usually all these differences based on caste and jati, which is why Ambedkar said go out of villages and go to a thing, because villages are a nest of this bigotry, right? So he said go to the cities where you can be an individual without having to worry about which caste you belong to and whether you are higher in the hierarchy or lower, right? So now that India is now almost 55% urban, not according to the census, but in terms of actual descriptions of number of people who live in or near big cities.
Correct.
Now, do you know, for example, 5% of India live in the national capital region, right? It is not just the theoretical Delhi population, but it includes all the agglomerations around Delhi. 5% live in the Mumbai metropolitan region, which includes, if you don't include Kalyan in Mumbai, then Mumbai is smaller. But if you include the entire agglomeration, Navi Mumbai, Thane, everything, Mira Road, Bhayandar, Vasai, Virar, all those things, then you'll suddenly find 5% of India lives here.
And makes sense.
And you're all urban, because the same guys go to Bombay and come back, they work here, even if they don't travel every day, they come for business here. So this is where this kind of rigid casteism is going to die.
Right.
And it is dying. Right. It is only our politics that is making caste relevant, because caste is useful as a mobilization tool. But even that is coming down, because now castes have learned to understand that it's okay to vote in a certain thing, but they don't actually practice it like that. So those are whatever happens where you say a Dalit cannot come to a wedding on a horse or some such stupid things.
Right.
That is to be a localized incident, but because we think it is something that is happening everywhere, which is not so.
Right.
But media, what tends to happen is media tends to be national. So we get to know the aberrations in the system, and we think that is the norm, whereas those are the aberrations.
Correct.
So we think it's going.
So first time when I actually got to learn about caste and everything, when I had to face what is caste, actually was in Rajasthan. I had gone for a trip and I lost my phone from the moving train, and I had to go to the police station and file an FIR and the complaint. And the police officer there, he asked me, "What is your caste?" And I was shocked. Why do I need to give my, tell my caste to just file a complaint? And that's when I realized, okay, we have some very serious issues over here. Do you think that in some way we are trying to solve those issues now, or because of the politics we are just going to live with these issues?
See, I think both things are true. Meaning the politics makes getting vote banks on the basis of caste affiliation important. Also, because jobs tend to go, reservations tend to go, you have to display your caste and then go, right? So I think it is a stage we are going through where these things are important. But over a period of time, these things will become less and less important because human beings evolve. Even though I may belong to a caste, I don't necessarily identify with everything that caste does or doesn't do, right? So it's a phrase, it's a phase where I think you go through because you want, you think belonging to a caste will help you progress faster, so you're doing. But once you achieve that progress, then you will find that it's not that material.
Right.
So I think that people are using caste as a crutch to see if they can get themselves ahead faster.
Right.
So once a certain minimum level of economic thing, if you actually see, this is what is happening. If you notice, see in 1980s when the Ram Mandir agitation started, then there are two kinds of agitation. One was the Mandal OBC agitation. The other was the Hindu agitation. Now what has happened is, the OBC agitation took, after that all states legislated OBC quotas.
Okay.
But once OBCs realized that they are going to be part of the mainstream now because they're going to get quotas, they're going to get ahead, suddenly they all became Hindus. Meaning they realized that, okay, we had to use caste to fight for our rights only up to this point. After this, they are the strongest Hindus. Today, if you see, most chief ministers in BJP are OBCs. From Prime Minister, or you go to Shivraj Singh Chauhan, or you can go to the Patels in Gujarat. Almost all of them are OBCs.
Correct.
Why are they so? And why are they so Hindutva oriented? Because they have suddenly realized that the caste is fine up to a point. But now that I know I am not going to be kept back because of my caste, then I become a Hindu.
Right.
This is what happens. The last bit of left is the SC/ST, who now need to feel that they are sufficiently empowered where they can discover their Hindutva and say, I am also Hindu.
Right. So I want to quote you here. So this is from one of your recent articles in Swarajya, where you are saying, we are being painted as an oppressive state out to victimize its various minorities, underprivileged jatis or social groups. We clearly see that there have been international attacks on us, and they particularly talk about our caste system, the jatis, varnas and everything. Why are we not doing anything for that? Why are we, sun ke kyun le rahe hum? This is the larger question here.
See, one is historically we have been better at articulating our differences than our unity. So, I mean, we have always been, we have always quarreled. I mean, you have some small problem with me, I will fight with you, whereas our common interests, I'll let it go because I'll take the help of an enemy who wants to destroy both of us. So this is one, historically we have had this problem and that is still there. Second thing is, I think Hindus, unlike Christianity and this thing, they have not learned to think strategically. They have to think long term.
Right.
And we tend to typically if you are a converting kind of religion, you tend to think long term. Why? Because suppose let's say today I give you some benefit and convert you to my religion. Okay, any religion. I'm not talking about any particular religion. Okay, but what is the guarantee that you'll remain converted after 10 days or 10 years, depending on, say, now I don't need this. Once you have, say, found your feet, you've become better off, you become educated, you got a good job. Now why do I need to do that? So converting religion tends to think long term. So they now have to ensure that your children are brought up in the converted religion and their children are there. So they insist that when you convert, you have to come, you have to attend all these religious classes, you have to do this, you have to start contributing to this, my church or my mosque and things like that. So what they do is, they tend to think long term. So they know that no conversion is complete till you have finished 4 or 5 generations.
Right.
So like for example, whereas Hindus have done the exact opposite. They've actually, for example, when Tipu Sultan came to Malabar and converted a lot of Hindus.
Right.
So he was gone in 5-10 years. Those Hindus would have wanted to return. What did we Hindus do? We did stupid things. We said, no, once you consume beef and you got circumcised, you're no longer Hindu, forget about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Whereas they do the opposite. They go out of their way to make sure that this conversion stays on for a long time. So what they do is, converting religions tend to think long term because they know that no human being is fully converted till it seeps into his bones.
Yeah, yeah.
And our thing is the opposite, saying that look, once you decide you're going, why are you bothering me with it?
Yeah.
So we tend to be short term thinking.
Right.
Which is why when all these international guys make all these things, they are doing it from a very long term perspective because their historical thing is to think long term. They want to create, retain their power for a very long time.
Right.
So they are using their money and their wealth and their efforts to destroy others who will become a threat to them.
Correct.
They made a mistake with China. The reason is that from between 1970s and 2010, they were building up China as an antidote to Russia. But Russia collapsed 30 years ago. Now China has become a threat to America, not to Russia. Right. So, and Russia is shrinking in size.
Yeah.
They're not going to be a global power, though they are a military power. So the point is, the West does not want to create another China in India, or at least that's what they believe. Though India will never become a China because of our essential diversity, China is monocultural.
Right.
They want to make even Tibetans and Uyghurs become Mandarin China, like Han. They want to force intermarriage, force Sinification, which will never happen in India. So the West need not fear us, but their way of thinking has been determined by their history,
right?
Which is that unless you use force and convert, it will not happen. And that if you build another monoculture, they will be a threat to you.
Right.
That is why they are trying to see how to use your fault lines to destroy you.
Right.
They want India, but they want a weak India. They don't want an India that talks back.
They don't want another China to happen here.
Yeah.
So
even though it won't happen, but they don't know that.
Correct. So one thing which this brings me to is every religion sort of has a political side. A lot of people also debate that Hindutva is that political side of Hinduism. In the same way, Christianity has a political side, Islam has a political Islam for them. In your book, you talk about why Hinduism needs to go back to becoming a missionary religion now, and emphasis being on to go back. Firstly, when was Hinduism a missionary religion, and why does now it needs to go back to those roots?
See, we were always a missionary religion, but our missionary religion did not think of conversions as central to it. Our missionary purpose was about saying, okay, when Adi Shankara, he didn't go around trying to convert anybody into anything. Right. He said that, look, this is the truth. I believe in Advaita. This is what. So he spread the idea of Advaita.
Correct.
He did not say you have to become a Hindu in order to become that. Similarly, say Buddha, even though he created the Sangha and all that stuff, he did not say that you have to become Buddhist. That Buddhism came much later. So we have had missionaries all through. When you look at Chaitanya Deva, or you look at Ramanujacharya in the south, or you look at all the Tulsidas guys, or Shirdi Sai Baba, all these guys were actually missionaries in their own way, where they said this is the way I think we can approach spirituality and God, and a lot of people followed them. They didn't try to convert anybody.
What is the reason for that? Why not? Why didn't they convert people? Because they had a huge following.
No, that's the thing. That in Dharmic religions, the importance is to convert within, not outward. That is, you don't have to. If Jagannathan likes something in Christianity, he can adopt it in his life. Right? If I think charity is good, I can adopt it as a way of life.
Right.
I don't have to become. Jagannathan doesn't have to become George in order to do things. There, they believe in converting your identity itself.
Right.
That is, Jagannathan has to become George in order to be called a Christian.
Right.
So that kind of missionary thing is what they did. So we have had missionaries of a different kind. Guys who dealt with high philosophy and better way of life. And a lot of people obviously, so now we need, when you're confronted with guys who want to convert you through identity, then if you do not build that strength within you, you are soon going to be taken over by that.
Right.
It's like that. So you need to do that till you come to get them to accept the dharmic way of rules. If you accept the dharmic way of existence, then you don't have to be a missionary religion. Right. Then you can just pursue great ideas, high thoughts, and that's it.
Right.
You can be a missionary in that sense.
Correct. So the people, I think so it's called ISKCON temple. The ISKCON organization is somewhat in this umbrella.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Because see, they for a Christian, for example, Jesus, Son of God, start of story, end of story, right? So ISKCON does the same thing. What do they do for them? Krishna is there. Though they celebrate all the other Hindu festivals, but they say everything is a manifestation of Krishna.
Right.
So think for them, they ISKCON, Krishna consciousness is their center thing.
Correct.
You have to only pray to Krishna, nothing else needs to be done. So Gita has become their core text, not so much the Vedas or Upanishads,
right?
But more of these. Though they borrow from all that,
right?
But they say that Gita is my Bible, kind of equivalent. So they have taken a very monocultural view of Hinduism, and they can grow because of that. Because when you're faced with the aggressive missionary religions, that's one way to protect your strength. So they're doing a good job in their own way, but at some point you have to transcend that also.
Correct. So while we were talking about all of these things, one thing which now the curiosity takes me over there is, when did we, as a nation, as I don't know what to say, but when did we start leaning towards the leftist ideology? When did that happen, and why did that happen? Because India is an ancient civilization. Was it because of the Islamic colonialism, which was the Mughal rule, or the British colonialism? What was the reason for this, leaning towards leftist ideologies, leaving our own roots?
I think there are two things. First of all, the word left and right is today wrong because it's a French Revolution term.
Right.
Where I think on the left were people who wanted change, and the right were all the old class thing and all
traditions.
That. Yeah. Now, today the word left and right must be applied only in the context of a specific issue. Like, for example, are you in favor of free food for the poor?
Yeah.
It's not a left-right issue anymore. No? So you say on this, if you are somebody who believes that nobody should be given free food, then you are right. If you say the poor who are hungry should be given free food, then you are considered left. So this left is not wrong. Because letting people die cannot be anybody's right. Right. So in that sense, we are taking this whole left-right thing a little too seriously. It doesn't exist. You must refine left and right based on the issue. Okay. So the second thing we need to understand is that this whole business of being politically left became a problem during, especially after 1960s, when the Congress government was falling apart and Indira Gandhi needed the support of the left. From then on, all the education ministers said that history must be rewritten according to Marxist principles. And those guys had a view. If you actually look at it, out of the 4 of the first 5 education ministers were Muslims, right? Now they obviously have a certain idea about how education should be done, right? So their views of how history should be written came central. Then after 60s, the left controlled all academia, all history writing, everything. So that they created 2-3 generations of people who were schooled in that tradition.
Right.
Now changing that will take some time. Because the issue is not about left or right, whether you are for the poor or against the poor.
Correct.
The issue is on any particular issue whether you are going to take a welfareist view or not. That's an economic self. But as far as history is concerned, you got to be focused on the truth.
Right.
Okay. So these people were busy falsifying history in order to build a so-called synthetic idea of India, which supposedly where Mughals played such a big role in the unification of this country. Yeah, the political unification can happen multiple times, but we were politically unified in the Gupta period, in the Mauryan period.
Correct.
So that has happened and it changed also.
Right.
So it's not like the only Mughals suddenly came and decided that they are going to unify India. Right. So these guys started feeding this false history that India came only during the Mughal period because they unified a lot of the north and things. But what they don't want to emphasize is that there is not a single temple that is older than 200 years in all of North India. All the ancient temples of North India are destroyed. It is only where Mughals and Muslims didn't rule, like in south of India, where you find Hindu temples that are older than 200, 300 years old. Why does that happen? They don't want to answer that question. Okay. So, this is not to say anything about Muslims today, but their forefathers did this.
Correct.
Because their version of religion was about destroying other people's place of worship, which was not the case in India.
Right.
Which is what a adharmic view of religion is, where you want to destroy another person's way of worship rather than promoting your own way of worship. That is what is adharmic. When I say we are a dharmic nation, it is that nobody is going to destroy anybody else's religion. That has to be central theme, agreed. Then you will have any amount of communal harmony, there is no problem.
Correct. So what is your idea of Bharat then? What is your idea of Bharat? Like in the modern world, what is Bharat for you?
So Bharat for me is a recognition of several facts. One, that we were not a nation born in 1947. We are a civilization that's nearly 4,000 to 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
And one of the word Bharat comes from a tribe, Bharata, which
Correct.
came with this thing. And the idea got taken up by the whole of India through a natural process of osmosis. Nobody had to come and beat somebody on the head and say, look, we are Bharat. Right? So it is a natural outgrowth of people who corresponded with each other, interacted with each other. I mean, why did various ideas? I mean, the Ramayana took place in the east of India, right? Ayodhya and all towards the east, relatively.
Correct.
Mahabharata to the north. Why did all these stories become popular? We became a nation because of our epics, our sense and connection with each other, north or south, right? So, the idea of Bharat is this, that we talk to each other, we share our heritage, we grow by borrowing, and that is what the thing is. And the idea that no one has an exclusive right to the truth. Truth belongs to all of us. We may all have some. We are like the blind man and the elephant.
Right.
You got hold of the trunk and said it looks like this, the foot, and then it looks like a tree trunk and things. But the fact is, the elephant is an elephant.
Correct.
We may, as human beings, only know some parts of it.
Right.
So the basis of Dharma is to say that the truth exists, but we may not always have access to all of it. So it's best to give anybody the benefit of doubt. And if you got hold of some part of the truth, accept it. Respect the fact that he has some idea about what the elephant is. It may not be your idea of elephant because you got hold of the tusk and he said it feels like a strong stick.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. So it has been, thousands of years and everything. What has kept us together? What is that, one thread that has kept Bharat? Like we have lost our essence, but still some sort of, there's some kind of thread that is keeping us together even now. What is that?
I think it is the concept of Dharma.
But so a lot of people don't understand what is Dharma. Then how is it?
No. If I ask you what is your Dharma, you may now today in Western context you will say I am Hindu, I am Muslim. That is rubbish. But if you say what is your duty, आपका धर्म क्या होता है, इस सिचुएशन में आपका क्या धर्म है, then you will know the answer.
Right.
So that idea that there is a certain context in which you have to do certain right thing, that is there subliminally, even though we are now conflating the word dharma with religion and a particular way of worship. So that is there. Second thing, we all believe in the idea of actions having consequences.
Right.
That is the theory of karma. Okay. Even in Buddhism, even in Jainism, the concept of karma exists. That if you do certain things, it will have certain consequences.
Right.
You don't have to believe in rebirth. But rebirth is saying in the previous birth I must have done something terrible, that's why you are suffering now. That you don't have to do that. But you do believe in the concept of karma.
Correct.
And the last thing is acceptance, not just tolerance of diversity. These are the three things that define us. And most Hindus, when we keep saying, the problem was actually faced only after Christianity came into being. Okay. See, the Romans were also followers of Dharma in their own way, right? They worshipped many gods. They borrowed God from Hellenism and they took it over. The great Roman Empire came, right?
Yeah.
Their way of diversity was you accept all gods as acceptable. Their problem came when Christianity came and said your God is wrong. Right. So all the conflict started the minute you say divided the world into two, my God or the highway.
Correct.
My way or the highway.
Correct.
So this idea of God suddenly changed with the Abrahamic Religion. It did not change with Judaism, mind you. Though the original idea of the one God came from Judaism.
Right.
But Judaism had the saving grace that they didn't think that their God needed to be imposed on anybody else.
Yeah.
So they did not convert God into a political leader who needs to rule over everybody else. It was Christianity and Islam that made God into a head of the whole world.
Right.
And then said that my God has to rule and it is my job to see that he rules.
Correct.
So that it became from religion, it became politics.
Hmm.
If you read Jim Warner's books, he clearly says there is the prophet, when he was in Mecca, he had only 100, 150 followers. I mean, the religious part. That is when he was preaching his religion.
Right.
But the minute he went to Medina, he became a military and political leader.
Yeah.
Then suddenly the whole world started going for him because he had might. So the ability to impose a will was what made that religion suddenly become more political.
Correct.
And more militaristic, right? So Islam, the lesson they drew was that if you want to grow the faith, you have to be militarily powerful and you have to grow it like that.
Does Hinduism need to go this way? Like Hindutva, does it need to go this way?
Only to the extent of defending what it stands for.
Okay.
See, you can't be a pacifist like Gandhi for a very simple reason. Because once somebody has destroyed you, what is left of you?
Yeah.
You know, why did Krishna say, see, Pandavas, Arjuna was willing to say, I don't want to fight my uncle and all my friends and relatives here, right?
Yeah.
Krishna said, but if you do that, you are a coward because you are basically not even defending what you stand for.
Right.
Right? So you got to do it. Don't think of whether Bhishma is your great uncle or grand, Pitamaha, whatever it is. Just fight for what is right. Then only you preserve what is right.
Right.
After that, make amends for whatever mistakes you do, but you have to defend. So that is the whole message, that we should be the children of Krishna, not of Arjuna. I mean, Arjuna's doubt is the problem, not Krishna's certainty about what you need to do to defend yourself.
Wow. Wow. That hit me really hard. So, a few last things. So, one is you quote Mr. S.N. Balgangadhar in your book, wherein you have quoted him saying, Christianity expands sometimes by secularizing itself. One manifestation of this is liberalism or wokeism. Does Hinduism need to go this path where Christianity has gone? So, like for example, when we were talking about the language scenario, a lot of people say that Hinduism is a very liberal religion by birth, by its core philosophy is of liberal values. But a lot of people also say liberalism of today is not what Hinduism is. The definition differs. So, what is your take about this?
So, see, in a dharmic concept, there is no permanent liberalism or conservatism. The assumption of Dharma is that you need both people who are, what is a liberal? A liberal is somebody who wants faster change. I'm giving a very simple definition. And a conservative is someone who wants to slow down the pace of change. Right? So the liberal says that, look, a lot of things are wrong, we need to correct it, so let's abolish caste today itself. The conservative says, look, caste, in many of the things, caste is social capital. People get benefit by belonging to a social group.
Yeah.
So don't chuck the baby out with the bathwater. So these are two horses pulling you together. So what you need to do in Dharma is to say which is the right path, which is the more correct path at this point of time. You need to be liberal when you need to be liberal. You need to be conservative when you think you're going to destroy something vital.
Right.
Like you talked about that 280-year-old temple that was destroyed, right?
Yeah.
Now liberal will say, what is man, this is all rubbish, just piece of stone, get rid of it, throw it in the sea, right? But a conservative will say, yeah, this is part of our heritage, why do you want to throw it out?
Yeah.
Right? So here you need to be conservative. But when you say, okay, we can't have untouchability, this is rubbish, you cannot do this, you cannot discriminate against a fellow human being and say he is untouchable, right? So there you need to be liberal. So every human being is part liberal, part conservative.
Right.
It's the degree in which you vary, right? I may want faster change, you may want slower change, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So Dharma says that let each person change at his own pace. Only when my decision impacts you negatively, then you have to stand up and fight.
Right.
So that's where it is.
Right.
So I think we need to, the current definitions of woke liberalism is a problem. Because they say what we say is right.
Right. They won't let anybody enter there.
That's right. They'll cancel all the guys.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear you.
Correct.
Why will you not hear me? I mean, you may not agree with me. Hinduism allows you to disagree with me. Nobody says that you have to do what I say. But why do you are so afraid that you don't have to listen to what I have to say?
Correct.
So that is another form of exclusion.
That whole concept of agreeing to disagree, that concept is dying slowly because of this woke liberalism that is happening.
Correct. So, and you may find the same thing in the conservative. They don't want to listen to any liberal, which is wrong. So, we are all conservative liberals actually, or liberal conservative.
Right.
The proportion varies from individual to individual, and
Right.
that is right also, because society cannot progress only in one direction. You need somebody to hold you to basics,
Right.
and you also need somebody to push change.
Right.
So if you let go of both and say only one side works, then you're going to end up in a mess.
Right. Got it. So one last thing, which is now I don't know how to frame this question, because this might be a two-part question. One is, what sort of difficulties do you see for Hinduism right now, and what is the future of Hinduism? Do you think it will decline? Do you think it will only increase with time? Like the followers of Hinduism, they will increase. What will happen to Hinduism in the longer run?
See, you can't predict like that. What I do believe is that there are certain Hindu ideals that are worth protecting, not caste-based discrimination.
Will we be able to protect those ideologies?
No, you don't have to. Hinduism is not an ideology. It's an approach to retain diversity, difference, and independence of thought.
Yeah.
Right? Where you can choose your own God. That's the ultimate form of independence.
Right.
So the point is, you need that. In the 21st century, I think only the Hindu thought process will have. Whether Hinduism will exist in a specific form, I don't know. But there is a lot more interest in the core ideas that drove Hinduism. I mean, take for example, today, you have the concept of LGBTQ, right?
Right.
Now, this idea existed long back in Hinduism. You had the concept of the Ardhanarishwar. What is it? That is, you are basically androgynous in nature.
Right.
You have a masculine and a feminine side to you, and there may be two extremes. But in what proportion they exist in any one individual varies.
Right.
Now, instead of slotting people into L and G and BTQ and all that, you say you are basically a mixture of all. And which particular one manifests itself in you is your choice you make.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you have to be slotted as a L. If you may be more than L. You may not. Today, what you're doing, liberals are doing is they are creating a new caste system where they are saying L is different from G is equal to B, that kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas these differences, just like I'm saying, you can be a partly liberal in some areas, conservative in some areas. Similarly, human beings are not only one or the other. There are many things. And which particular thing dominates in you is for you to determine.
Right.
You don't have to discriminate against a person who is different from you. Nor do you have to say that is the norm now, everybody has to fit that slot.
Correct.
Right? It's not required.
Correct. So, aren't you scared to say things like this? Because when I look at, I am a content creator and my purpose is to create content without any bias or anything. And I am more scared of the people who are on the left side, the woke liberals, than the people who are on the extreme right. Because I know what woke left people can do. I know the degree to which they can go. And here you're openly saying, the sort of things that these people are doing. Aren't you, anywhere scared that you might get cancelled for this? Because that is the new world we live in.
Oh, that cancellation is happening. I mean, that's not a problem. But the thing is, what do you do?
Yeah.
See, ultimately, you talk to people, right? So these guys can cancel you from, maybe they may not invite you to a seminar that they are organizing, but you can't help it. But if they want to shut their ears and not listen to the truth, are they the losers or us? I don't know. Because ordinary people are willing to listen to you.
Right.
It's only that you, in your elite group, you are trying to say, I will listen only to people I agree with. Then what are you? You have created a small echo chamber that may be far removed from reality. So I think they will lose out, because once they think, what has happened is, liberals are actually the biggest phonies for one simple reason. The point is, they claim to speak on behalf of a very large mass, which they have not consulted. Meaning, what they are doing is they are trying to protect their own interests. Because a liberal thinks that if he takes a certain position, he will get funding, he will get certain things, he will get to go to Harvard and Ivy League institution and things, right? Right now, that is the norm. But at some point, it will change.
Correct.
Because the world will suddenly say, oh my God, this fellow is talking nonsense, is largely bogus, where I don't see ordinary people like this. Right? There is a huge backlash even in the US
Correct.
that's happening.
Yeah.
That which is why some of the problem was, of course, because somebody pretty bad character like Trump happened to symbolize those hopes. But if you have a more rational kind of Republican, you will find that most people will agree with them that we don't want to go in that direction.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the whole progress has been stopped by Trump because he happened to be a guy who was very rotten in nature.
Yeah.
So somebody with such a bad kind of personal character comes to symbolize the hope of the non-woke, then you will find a setback because it's easy to caricature him and paint him as a misogynist or a homophobe or whatever it is, right? Whereas a more rational Republican can actually say that, look, I don't want to go in this woke direction. I want to go in the direction of common sense.
Right.
That is where most people want to be.
Right.
It's not like they want to be with Trump. But they have no option because the other side has got more foolish guys, but Trump looks even more foolish as an individual.
So do you think US is imploding because of what's happening in their society right now?
Yeah, I think so. Because see, I think right now when you say imploding, meaning there are a lot of vested interests that are going to keep it together. But society has been deeply polarized.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, if you look at it broadly, I would say that the two coasts are extremely liberal and woke, but the whole center is quite different.
Right.
Meaning which is broadly defines conservative and liberal, but the middle of the whole from California to this area and the East Coast to going up to just north of Florida is slightly liberal, even woke.
Right.
It's the middle America that's quite different and alienated from these two poles.
Right.
So they are having a problem.
Correct. Okay. So I've done like 90 odd episodes till now on this podcast. You have been one of those guests for whom I had to research a lot and I still don't know what to ask you. Even though we have recorded for 1 hour 30 minutes right now, I still don't know what to talk about because you talk about so many things. Like you talk on the x-axis about the economy, about finances, and you also talk about the y-axis wherein you talk about philosophy, history, polity. And you have been one of the best guests probably we have had on this podcast. There was this one question which my friend, when I told her that you are coming on the podcast, she specifically asked me कि ये ज़रूर पूछना. People want to know from you, how do you build your knowledge in the modern day? What kind of books do you read? What kind of content do you follow? So can you give them certain, like these are the books that you must read. These are the films or documentaries that you must see.
No, I would not give any specific set of things. I believe that you must read everything. Meaning, because reading the wrong thing, if you don't read some amount of Marx, you will not know what they stand for, right? If you don't read somebody like what the, let's say, Christian theologists did, you won't know what they stand for, what is good in Christianity. I think you must read everything. But if you want to be rooted in India, I would say you must read a lot of people like Swami Vivekananda. You should read modern day, you should read people like, there are so many people I have quoted from, there's no shortage. I can send you a list if you like. I don't immediately say that you must read A, B, C. But there is a lot you need to read. And there are a lot of, the most encouraging part is, there are at least 30-40 new scholars that are coming who are just building in the last 5-10 years.
Right.
Or for that matter, you must read Conrad Helse, for example.
Oh wow, yes.
He's a fantastic, he's a Belgian whose heart is dharmic, who is a former Christian and along the lines of that. But he's been a huge support for Hindu self-esteem. Our problem is our minds are colonized.
Right.
It takes a long time to decolonize your own mind because your way of thinking has become Macaulay.
Right.
Even if you don't think Macaulay was a good influence. So it's like that.
Okay.
So consciously think about it. More than that, I think there are a lot of traditional people also who are learning a lot. I can give you a list. I'll make a list if you want. I can send you.
My audience would love that list because people here read.
Because it's not about one or two guys.
Right,
it's a lot of them.
Right.
And also a lot of the modern day spiritual leaders. Like say Sri Sri Ravi Shankar or Mata Amritanandamayi or even Sadhguru. They're all also windows into the new way of thinking, they're both modern and they have some rootedness. And plus there are also even say ISKCON, for example, they have some wonderful gurus like Gauranga Das,
Right.
And people like that, or say some of the really good Swamijis like Swami Mukundananda. They're all good.
So if I have to ask you specifically, because this is one of my interest area, if I want to know more about Hindutva, if I want to understand this philosophy, the roots of it, whom should I read? What are the books, or like where should I go?
I think you already know. I mean, I think you should read Savarkar certainly.
Okay.
On Hindutva. And Neelakantan is in fact
Right.
an improved version of Savarkar's this thing.
Wow.
Because it takes
Right.
it into a modern context. Because
So I have that book here, but
Yeah.
I'm just scared of the size. It's a very thick
No,
book.
it's a very serious dive into it.
Right.
So it will take a time to understand. But
Hmm.
Savarkar is a very slim book.
Okay.
And he did it in the context of 1920s, where there were a lot of anti-Hindu riots, and Gandhi was leading Hindus into what he felt was the wrong direction. So he wrote a more narrow text.
Okay.
But if you want to look at Hindutva in a modern context, I think somebody like Aravindan has certainly done a lot of work.
Okay.
And you should also look at Swami Vivekananda is a big factor. I think
Do you recommend reading Rajiv Malhotra's work?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. You should read all his books.
Okay.
You should look, especially his first book, Being Different is a wonderful book.
Okay.
That actually defines dharmic thinking. So being different is one, though these days nobody much talks about it. People talk about his later books like Snakes in the Ganga.
Right.
But that is more about Western interventions in our polity and others. But if you look at that, Breaking India was the earlier one. So Snakes in the Ganga is a follow-up to that.
It's part
modernizes that.
Correct.
But
Being
Different is a very good book.
Okay.
You must look at that. And also there is Indra's Net is there.
Right.
So Rajiv Malhotra is perfectly great book. Then Meenakshi Jain is very good modern historian who's understood the medieval history very well. So you have to look at that. And you must look at 2 or 3 ancient historians. One is R.C. Majumdar.
Right.
He's written 11 volumes. That is the only guy who has written about the broad sweep of Indian history without leftist bias.
Right.
Okay.
And I think so that is exactly why he is not popular today, because I have the first volume, but then when I got to know about this, I was like, I never knew about these 11 books that exist.
Yeah. The only thing you will need to modernize your thought on R.C. Majumdar is only one thing. At that stage when he wrote those books, the Aryan invasion theory was the norm. So a lot of people accepted that as a given, and he also takes that as a given.
Yeah.
But modern trends in understanding our past do not support any such theory.
Yeah.
In fact, we know that today there was no such thing as an invasion, though genetic infusions have happened.
Right.
Meaning at various points, see, in the old world there are no borders.
Right.
So people used to come and settle and intermarry, and those used to keep happening. Right.
Yeah.
So genetic infusions happen, and also don't forget, in those days you didn't need millions of guys to come to change the genetics.
Correct.
You need there's a tribe of 500 people here and a tribe of 1,000 people there,
Right.
and if they intermarried, the entire genetics would change because the law of exponential growth, right? So if you're looking at 4,000 years ago and today, just a population of 500 can give a population of 1.4 billion the same genetics.
Right.
So it is pointless to talk about Aryan invasion and things like that. We talk about 500 guys who came here.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. So today we know for certain, if you look at Shrikant Talagiri, his books are very tough to read. Even reading one page will put you to sleep.
Right.
But he's a brilliant guy. He is the one who is he's looked at linguistics, and he knows the Rig Veda was not written outside India. It was written in the Punjab, Haryana place.
Okay.
Because every geography that mentioned in Rig Veda has only those contexts.
Right.
So we know that Vedas were written here on the banks of the Saraswati, and later on in Ganga. Right. So, and then of course all the epics, Mahabharata, there, all that is there. So there's so much to read. It's not a thing. So I can give you a whole list.
Correct.
And some I mentioned just now,
Yeah.
but you can get more.
Yeah. So this is where I want to plug in your book as well, because when I read your book, it was like my mind opened up to so many different, people, to so many ideologies, so many philosophies in this one umbrella term of Hinduism. You talk about Hindu Rashtra, you talk about Hindutva, and you have actually quoted a lot of people in your book as well, which was one of the phenomenal things in the book. apart from all the learnings that I took, this was like a gateway to all of those brilliant minds as well. So thank you, sir, for writing this book, and I hope so a lot of people buy this book. And specifically, if you are watching on YouTube, you will find the link in the description for the book. Please go ahead, buy this book.
Thank you for the plug.
Thanks, sir. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. This was an absolute pleasure. As I said to you earlier, this podcast is all about, like, I don't want to do this for others. This is my curiosity. This is like a Guru Shishya Vidya for me. I am very curious by nature. I have thousands of questions. Even now, I want to ask you many questions. And you talk about so many subjects. So I hope so we get to do more podcasts in future.
Anyway,
And yeah, thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Yeah.